So thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Invasive Species in the School. Our new pilot program includes a free set of BC curriculum-linked lesson plans for grade 4 to 7 that you can use in your classroom or at home. These activities engage students in hands-on learning and provide knowledge, skills, and opportunities to deepen their connection to biodiversity and community. We'll be focusing on fun, hands-on activities that can get your students outdoors this spring that can be done right in your backyard or park. These lessons are supported by interactive online resources, videos, and community science reporting tools, and inspire students to take action around environmental issues. Educators who implement some of the activities can book an invasive species expert to virtually visit your classroom to answer questions, interact with students, and help plan field studies and/or restoration projects. After piloting, this online virtual platform will be available to classrooms and educators all across BC. Just a note on our presenters, I'd like to introduce Sue Stanford. She is the Education and Outreach Manager with the Invasive Species Council of BC. As a biologist and educator, Sue brings her work of over 30 years of experience researching and writing curriculum on topics ranging from biodiversity, outdoor classrooms, facilitating professional development workshops, and training industry professionals. Sue has been honored to work with a number of Indigenous communities in BC, as well as stewardship groups provincially and nationally. And I'd also like to introduce Stephanie Weinstein. She is the education lead with the Invasive Species Council of BC, and she is also a biologist and environmental educator with over 20 years of experience, whether facilitating professional development workshops with teachers, exploring BC's great outdoors with children, or developing curriculum-linked lesson plans and activities. She is passionate about connecting people to nature and inspiring them to learn about, care for, and take action to protect our biodiversity. And at this point, I will pass the mic over to our presenters, and I hope you all enjoy the webinar.
Hey, well, thank you so much, Allison, for that great introduction. Let me just get my screen shared with you folks. You can let me know if you can see that okay. Thumbs up with everybody?
Sue, we see your desktop background.
Oh, not again. Gee whiz. All right, hang on. How's that?
Not yet.
Oh.
Okay. Do you want me to,
sorry.
Would you like me to share for you? Oh, there you go.
Hang on, I'll try it one more time. Did it work that time? Oh, this is like,
it was popping up.
Yeah. Okay, hang on one more time. Sorry, folks. It's almost, okay, let's try this again. Okay.
Can you make it full screen? Yeah, there you go.
Oh, okay. For some reason, it's not showing on my other screen, but that is okay. As long as you guys can see that, we will get going. All right. Sorry about that. Never fails, little technical glitches. So welcome, everybody. Great to be with you this afternoon, and many thanks for joining us. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge that as a provincial organization, the Invasive Species Council of BC gratefully acknowledges the territories of the Indigenous peoples of BC, where we live and work to maintain healthy ecosystems for all. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about the Invasive Species Council. We're going to go through an educational framework that sort of provides the basis for the new program. I'll give you a little introduction to Invasive Species 101, talk about some educational strategies, and then get right into the program and share some activities with you folks. And before we get going, we're just going to run a little poll. I'll ask Nadine to throw a little poll up onto the screen to just get a sense of who's here with us today. So hopefully you folks can all see that and you can give us an idea of who you are. And this will help us, figure out a way to better meet your needs as educators too. All right. Got some staff, we got some teachers, we got non-formal educators. Awesome. All right. Perfect. Thanks so much for doing that. That's great. Like that helps us out. Just to also let you know, we're going to be sharing these slides with you folks afterwards as PDFs. So if I know I like to take notes, but if you want to, not worry about capturing some of the information or some of the websites, you're going to be getting those after the webinar. So, Invasive Species Council of BC. So we are a charitable organization and we work province-wide, focusing on education, outreach, training, and information. Basically, the council works right across BC with a whole bunch of partners, and partnerships are really key to the work that we do. We work with all levels of government, industry, lots of industry across the province, stewardship groups, the RESOs, who are the regional invasive species organizations. And we do a lot of cross-border collaboration. Invasive species don't tend to do very well with borders. They don't seem to pay much attention. And also the ISC is the founding member of the Canadian Council on Invasive Species. So we work at a national level as well. I'll let you folks read our vision and our mission. Basically, really we're just emphasizing that we're an action-oriented organization and that we work to protect BC's amazing landscapes and communities. This photo is of a staff member doing lake monitoring for invasive mussels and the caribou. So teaching about invasive species. So this is a bit of a rationale for how we often present educational themes. And it's based on a very sort of basic educational process where we're raising awareness first with our students, then encouraging appreciation of a topic, going a little bit deeper to build understanding of a topic or a subject, and then inspiring appropriate action. And way back when I did some education degrees, they called it the AAUA method. So what does it look like with invasive species? So basically you're raising awareness of what they are, kind of a basic place to start, but why they're important. So appreciating why they are important, what are their impacts and why we should care about them. Moving into, a deeper understanding. So, how does it affect our lives and how did we potentially bring them here? How did they get here? And then the inspiring appropriate action piece is really what we can do to basically, stop moving them around and stop bringing them in. So the educational framework, it shouldn't be seen as a linear process. It's really should be represented more as an educational sort of continuous learning cycle or circle with participants able to engage with a subject or issue at all different points. So for example, if you've been impacted by an invasive species, if you've got a whole bunch in your yard, you're quite aware of these are my impacts. So then you're trying to figure out what to do about them. And then often you will dig into, some more information about what they are and, why they're important. So lots of places for entry in this learning cycle. So we've sort of tried to base the webinar on this educational framework as well. So before we get into the what are invasive species, I wanted to share with you this little link to this great animated video that Ministry of Environment put out. If you haven't seen it, I'm not going to show it to you now, but we'll send you this link. And it's a really nice intro if you're doing any kind of teaching around invasive species. It's animated and it's fun and it's really short. So we'll send that off to you folks when you get the PDFs. So before we delve into terminology, I'm going to ask Nadine to run a little poll just to get a sense of invasive species knowledge. And again, it's not a test, but we're just trying to get a sense of how much people know about invasive species. It's always interesting to see. All right. They've got a little bit, a fair bit, a lot, too much maybe. All right. Great. So people in the webinar know a little bit or a lot about invasive species. So that's great. All right. I'll get you guys to do the rest of the webinar for me. All right. So terminology. So a lot of terms are used to describe introduced plant and animal species. Probably we can discuss these, these terms for the rest of our webinar. But I think it's important to be clear about the definitions we use and what we mean when we use these terms and these words. For example, noxious weeds, when we say noxious weeds, we refer to the legislated or regulated species in each province or state. Non-native or exotic species are not necessarily invasive. One of the words that we try to steer clear of, especially as educators, is the word alien. There's a fair bit of baggage around that word, alien invaders and illegal aliens. So just a heads up, we try to not use the word aliens. So let's look at some definitions. So native species. So a native species is one that naturally occurs in an area. Again, there's lots of definitions, but this is a species that has adapted and evolved in a certain place for a long period of time, and it's part of the ecosystem. And it's also co-evolved with the other species, the predators, the diseases, and the climate factors that are in that location. So a non-native species is a species that was introduced to a region or a country either on purpose, so a lot of people bring along their favorite plants from their garden when they move, or by mistake. So lots of things come in and ship ballast water or on luggage or on camping gear and boots, etc. And they usually come from quite far away. And we are the main vectors of spread, us humans. I think the key point here is to talk about that not all non-native species are invasive. I mean, tulips, they're a pretty cool Central Asian flower. They're non-native and non-invasive. Same with something like tomatoes. They came from Peru. I wish they were a bit more invasive in my garden, but a lot of the stuff we eat, a lot of our foods are, beneficial food sources, even wheat that came from the Nile Valley are, hugely grown, but not invasive. So what's an invasive species? So the ISCBC defines invasive species as any non-native organism that causes economic, environmental, or social harm, and that can spread very quickly to new areas. So what makes something invasive? So there's 4 main characteristics. Invasive species are really good at making babies or making seeds. So, something like purple loosestrife can produce over 300,000 seeds a year. Something like the invasive freshwater mussels, like zebra mussels, one little zebra mussel the size of your fingernail can produce 1 million eggs a year. And their seeds also get around really easily and effectively. So think of burrs on burdock plants that attach to, your clothes, your dog, your socks, etc. And also another good example is thistles. They have these great little parachutes and they blow in the wind and spread very effectively all through a field. So the third example is they're really good at quickly establishing. So we're talking plants primarily here, but they often are the first things to come up in the spring. And those of you who are gardeners know this from weeds. They're always 6 times bigger in my garden than anything else I'm trying to grow. So they come quickly, and they overpower native species. And they also many of them can actually grow from different plant parts. So some of them, like ragwort or Dalmatian toadflax, can grow from a little root crown or a stem or a piece of the crown. So they're good at making babies. Those seeds or babies can get around easily. They establish quickly. And because they don't come from here, they've come from somewhere else, they usually don't have the natural predators, the things that eat them, or the diseases that keep them under control in their home place. So this picture is a good example. This is orange hawkweed. This is something that's not grazed by either livestock or wildlife. So it spreads and they eat everything else but the orange hawkweed, so it spreads really widely. This is a great example as well of monoculture that we often see. So does that, I don't know, people have probably seen this comic, but I really like it because I guess because I've had this experience, and I don't know if you folks have. If you want to type in the chat, if you've been given or bought an invasive plant that has taken over your yard. It happened to me with periwinkle. And this is sort of what it's like. It's like you're doing battle with these things for for ages, it feels like. So we're not just talking about plants here. We're talking about a range of different species. So we're talking animals, plants, insects, fish, mammals, birds, etc. So insects like gypsy moth, European fire ant, different fish, small and largemouth bass, northern pike, yellow perch, the reptiles, for example, the red-edged slider turtles that are taking over from the western painted turtle, as well as the European wall lizards. Things like amphibians, the infamous American bullfrog that eats pretty well everything it can fit in its mouth, including ducklings, birds, and all 7 of our frog species. And then all these cute and fuzzy mammals like eastern gray squirrels and like nutrias. Nutrias are now found in the dikes in Richmond, and they're basically undermining them. So, we're not just talking plants here. Another example is birds, of course, things like starlings that were brought over from England to New York City, and now are one of the top 10 invasive species in the world. And then, of course, some of the really serious fungus and viruses and bacteria that are out there. The horrendous white nose syndrome fungus that is affecting our bats, a bat population in BC. Just started to, it's coming up from Washington and Oregon. And of course, the white pine blister ruts that was brought in the 1900s and essentially wiped out the white pine industry and plantations in BC. So why are invasive species a problem? So we've taken a look at definitions and some key species. So to take a look to move into that deeper understanding, it's time to look at, how it impacts all of us. And they basically impact every one of us, whether through increased costs, through damaged ecosystems, through loss of cultural and traditional species, reducing our recreational opportunities, damaging our water quality, or even our health. And for me, as a biologist, I am passionate about working with invasive species, primarily to protect BC's incredible biodiversity. We are so lucky to live here in this province. We have 3/4 of Canada's bird species and 3/4 of Canada's mammal species live here. We have a range of endemic species, which are known to occur nowhere else but in BC. And our bird species, incredible number of bird species, as I said, and 162 of them breed nowhere else but in BC. So we really are a supernatural province. So here's a question for you, and you can please write it in the chat box. I want you to guess the estimated annual impact of invasive species in Canada. So what Canada spends / loses in 1 year from invasive species. And Allison, you can tell me what people are writing in the chat, if it's hundreds of thousands or millions or billions of dollars. Let me know what you can see in the chat box.
All right, I will 6 million.
6 million. All right, that's a good guess. Any other guesses coming in?
3 billion.
3 billion.
120 million.
All right, we're getting closer. This is a shocking figure. We're talking 30 billion, so 20 billion in the forest sector alone. And this is a Canadian Food Inspection Agency's 2014 figure. So it's actually now seen as more than 36 billion. But this is, this often gets industry people to sit up and take notice, particularly in the forestry sector in this province, because of the huge losses that they've incurred. So there's an impact for you, and there's a hook for a lot of our population. Oops. Go back. Jumping right into Steph's program right here. I just wanted to talk about, before we get into that, I just wanted to talk about those kind of hooks, because I think what generally happens is when we're talking, depending on the audience we're talking about students. So things like impacts on their pets, impacts on gardens, impact on recreational activities, you know, all these different types of impacts that you know, will really hook your audience depending on who you talk to. So whether it's master gardeners, whether it's young students, whether it's you know, educators like yourselves, it's important to think about those hooks and you know, move forward from there. So I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie. She's going to move into some of the educational strategies and activities in our new program. So take it away, Steph.
Okay, thank you, Sue. Thanks for that great introduction. And yeah, so I'm going to be talking to you a little bit more about what we're developing, this pilot project that you all can be part of, which is the Invasive Species in the School program. So I'll have a few different notes here to that we'll be looking at some of the curriculum connections, the program concept, and we'll be sharing some activities for you to try out. Okay, here we go. So one of the great things about working on invasive species is that unlike many other environmental issues that feel so overwhelmingly large and feeling like, how can I as an individual make a difference, which can lead to a feeling of hopelessness or powerlessness and apathy. The great thing about invasive species is that no matter where you live and what age you are, they are a local issue that's relevant, that you can actually work on and see a difference that you make, which is a very empowering feeling. So it's a wonderful thing to work on, to feel like you're making a difference. And as educators, we all know that there's many learning styles. And as Sue said, there's many different hooks to get people interested. And we have to consider the various cultural backgrounds and our own histories and frames of reference. And that there are so many different learning styles, especially with younger students. I know even within my own family, the way my son and daughter learn is completely different. One's got to be moving all the time. The other one is always reading books, and some people are more visual, etc. So we're trying to develop lessons that touch on all of these different learning styles. And we're also trying to connect all of these lessons to the Ministry of Education curriculum. And this is important, even if you're not a classroom teacher, to understand what our children should be learning in school. And one of the great things about the BC curriculum is these core competencies, and learning about invasive species is a strong fit with the BC curriculum for all grades and all subjects. So if you're not familiar with it, the core competencies are sets of intellectual, personal, social, and emotional proficiencies that are foundational to all aspects of learning. And within this personal and social core competency is the social awareness and responsibility, which includes contributing to community and caring for the environment. So this is a really key thing that I think is so special about where we live, that this is something that all students are expected to be able to develop. Another strong connection to learning about invasive species is about place-based learning, which is the foundation for the science curriculum for all grades. And the place-based approach is about learning about your local area and building upon First Peoples knowledge and traditional ecological knowledge from that place, developing respect for the natural world and a sense of relatedness that encourages lifelong harmony with nature. So place is defined as any environment, locality, or context with which people interact to learn, create memory, reflect on history, connect with culture, and establish identity, which is foundational to First Peoples' perspectives of the world. And the way that students are expected to learn about science, the doing of science, is what we call the curricular competencies, which also include these elements that I've listed here, which are connecting to local places. So we want students to learn about the invasive species that are right in their own backyards and connect to the biodiversity that's all around them. And then what students are expected to understand and know about science. We have this here in this chart. This will be shared with you, so it's more for future reference, but it's a strong fit with what we're developing for grades 4 through 7. And also we're developing some lessons as well for younger grades, and in particular grade 3, there's a connection with invasive species with the Science Big Ideas, which include learning about ecosystems and biodiversity in the local environment. So here's our invasive species in the school program concept. We hope to inspire and engage students in learning about and protecting BC's biodiversity by preventing the spread of invasive species. This is a picture that I took some years ago of my daughter. She's pulling ivy, and this was with her class. So as I mentioned, they're connected to the curriculum, and not just including science, but other subjects as well. So language arts, fine arts, some active games, so connecting to physical activities, lots of different subjects in there, and connecting also to first people's perspectives. So we're focusing right now on grades 4 through 7, as well as some lessons for primary. And there are other, maybe in the future, we'll do some additional grade levels. A lot of these activities, you start indoors, creating the, introducing some of the concepts and then bringing it outdoors and doing that place-based connections. Flexible duration. So some of the activities might be done when you have a bit of time for during a block, or it could be a bigger unit over the course of a week, or even longer term throughout the year, looking at seasonal changes. And inquiry is a big part of science and the curriculum in general, just to have students really develop their own interests and curiosities and really make it meaningful to them. So we have some inquiry questions as a jumping off point for learning. And then we also include some creative ways to share within your school community or with us or with the larger community using technology, but as an option, recognizing that not everyone has equal access to technology. Other elements of the invasive species in the school program include some action challenges, so bringing into play those core competencies and stewardship components, to feel that empowerment of taking part, playing your part to help prevent the spread of invasive species, and educator support. So as Allison mentioned earlier on, we are piloting these programs, and we would love to hear feedback from you and encourage you to try out some of these activities. Let us know how they go, share them with us with some photos, and we will provide you with some resources and a virtual visit with an invasive species expert to your classroom. And that includes the lessons that I'm going to be sharing with you today, which you could use that expert field trip this spring if you have time, or in the fall. And here's a wonderful quote: "In the end, we will conserve only what we love. We will love only what we understand, and we will understand only what we are taught," by Baba Diom, a Senegalese forester. And so this is a hands up and thank you to all the educators here with us who do so much to try to make the world a better place. All right, so I'm going to get into some of the activities now. So as I'm sharing some of these with you, feel free to put some of your ideas in the chat, how you might use these with your students or with your children or in your community, and how you might extend the learning. These are smaller portions of larger activities that include other elements. So I'm just sharing with you some that are, sorry, I need to get rid of that. I thought I turned that off. So these are ones that we realize it's the end of a very busy and challenging year, and these are ones that we thought are easy to use and incorporate into your busy school days over the rest of the year. And this is also a fun Zoom version that we're going to try now called Word Smack. It's we're going to do the Zoom version to test your knowledge and some of those terms that Sue introduced earlier on. In the classroom, you could do it in a different way with pieces of paper for these terms. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to read a description, and you have to, based on what I say, guess whether it is an invasive, a native, or a non-native. So put it in the chat. The first person to write the correct answer is the winner. And we'll get some of, if any of you are competitive types, we'll see, get you engaged here now. Okay, so for the first one, I started out as a pretty flower patch planted in a garden, but now I'm moving into the forest. Just try to stop me. Native, invasive, or non-native? And I'm going to let our tech support or Allison monitor the chat to see who's got that one there.
It looks like we're all saying invasive.
Invasive, very good. I remember on our poll, we had nobody that said they didn't know anything about invasive species. So you are all doing great there. Okay, now here's another one for you. I am a delicious fruit tree, but I can't seem to grow well outside of a warm garden with lots of fertilizer. Native, invasive, or non-native?
All right.
What do we have here?
Non-native, a lot of non-native.
Non-native, very good. So it's not invasive. That's a good one. Okay, and one last one. I am a caterpillar of a rare butterfly that has evolved to feed only on one type of plant in southern BC.
And we've got overwhelmingly native here.
Very good. You all are winners. Thanks for playing along. So for this activity, we have a lot of other scenarios, and you can make up your own. And in the classroom, you could split up students into small groups and give them each these pieces of paper with these cards, and whoever smacks the first one wins, and they can keep score. For a non-contact version, if you have lots of fly swatters, you could do a word SWAT version of this. Okay, next slide, here we go. So after learning some of the basics about invasive species, you can introduce the idea of what is a healthy habitat and an unhealthy one, and connecting to what students are, places that they care about, special places for them, and the biodiversity that lives there. So this is an art project called Habitat Hit, What Happened Here. And so students choose a habitat to draw. In this activity, we have 4 different possibilities, but you could include others that are relevant for your location. So we have forest, an ocean environment, fresh water, or a garden or farm. And I did this one with my daughter, and she drew this beautiful ocean. And what you would do is just brainstorm some of the different animals and plants and invertebrates and all the different life that might live in that location. And it's not important to be technical. It's an art project after all. You could be as creative as you want, but you would just encourage students to have lots of different colors and sizes and shapes and forms of different creatures that would live there. But you could get into more details about what you might expect to find using local field guides. And you could see in this picture, you could get into also some ideas around ecology and food webs and interrelationships and biodiversity of the organisms that live in this place. But unfortunately, we're talking about invasive species. So for each of these habitats, we have some invasives that could affect that habitat. So in the top left, we have English ivy planted in a garden that's now escaping into the forest and smothering the life there. Excuse me. In the top right, it's a European green crab whose larvae were dumped from ship's ballast water and are now invading the intertidal environment and ripping up the eelgrass and affecting all the species that live in that habitat. The bottom left is a brown marmorated stink bug that hitched a ride on a truck and is now eating up and damaging all the fruit and vegetables and ornamental plants in the orchard and gardens. And believe it or not, in the bottom right, that used to be somebody's pet goldfish, and it was dumped into a lake or pond, and it is now eating up everything around it. It's pretty giant now. Who knew that goldfish could get so big? So in this activity, we have some stencils here that students can use depending on which habitat they chose to draw. And you could draw this directly on their artwork, or in the case I did here, my daughter did it on a sheet protector. So she has the European green crab that has invaded. The nice thing about the sheet protector is you can take your habitat, your healthy habitat, out of the sheet protector. So you could talk about some restoration and some strategies that you could use to prevent the spread, or what you might be able to do to restore that habitat to a healthy state again. So as Sue talked about, there's many characteristics of invasive species, and not all native species that are introduced become invasive. Many won't survive or thrive. But those that do become invasive have certain characteristics and adaptation that help them to thrive and take over. So if you could just put in the chat, if you have any observations about these photographs here, and what features you see that you think might help them to thrive based on what Sue told you earlier, or what you might see just in these photos, or what you might know already. And the point of this is really to emphasize that with students, you want to get them observing and noticing what's around them and looking at patterns. And it's not critical to be able to identify everything that's around them, especially with plants, which are very hard for even experts to tell the difference of sometimes. Okay, so I will reveal. So this is like Sue showed earlier, it's a monoculture. This is Leafy Spurge, which contains a toxic sap. So just seeing something that grows in a monoculture like that can be a red flag. It's not grazed by wildlife or livestock. And a lot of people in Victoria, where I live, plant it in their gardens. And it's one of the few things that the deer are not eating. Then we have thistle seeds spread by the wind, these parachutes. There's many of them, and they have a great way of getting around. Down below, inspiration for Velcro Burdock burrs, which hitchhike with their hooks onto animals, fur, clothing, vehicles, and find a new place to spread. And then in the bottom right, this plant is growing through asphalt, which is always a sign that it could become an invader. And in fact, this is Japanese knotweed, which is an incredibly aggressive invader. So after kind of priming students to think about the patterns and some of these features that invasive species have that help them to thrive, then you can bring them outdoors to go on a little adaptations hunt. So this is part of a lesson called the Invasive Big League and the Away Team Advantage. So what I call the away team advantage is thinking, instead of our home team, which is like our native species, which should have the advantage, the ones come from away have these adaptations and body systems that help them to thrive and survive. So this is a simple scavenger hunt that students can do in the schoolyard, in the backyard, as you're going from one place to another with your students, or on your end of the year field trip. Just throw in some learning about invasive species. It's something that's quick and easy to do and gets them noticing what's around them much more. We'll be sharing these with you later, so I don't want to spend too much time on the details there. Oh, and a great thing that you can do as well, getting into the taking action part on those field trips. So now you've learned about some of the characteristics of invasive species. Well, as your students throw their backpacks on the ground and are running around the fields, have them practice play, clean, go, which is a strategy to prevent the spread of some of those invasives. So they play, then you're going to look at your boots, your socks, and the bottom of your pants, cuffs, and your bags, and look for some of those pieces of plants or seeds that might have hitched a ride. So you can clean it off with a brush. It's quite interesting to look at and see what you find. And then you can go on to your next location with this feeling that you know that you are protecting it from the spread of invasive species. And this link has some really simple videos and other information to help you learn more about play, clean, and go. So another activity I wanted to share with you, this is called the Cute and Fuzzy Invader Takeover. And it is something that students of any age can play. It's a fun game of tag, and it's all about how to be a responsible pet owner. And we have a video that we wanted to share with you that we have made recently that would be a fun way to introduce this activity. So we're going to share that with you now and hope that it works to see and hear. So here we go. Great.
My name is Zara and I am 5 years old. And my question is, how can a fuzzy bunny be bad?
That is such a great question. Fuzzy bunnies are not bad, but they're definitely in the wrong place when you see them out and about in BC. These bunnies that you see out in the wild are actually invasive species and should be in homes as pets. The problem with invasive bunnies is that in the wild they eat food that native animals like deer and mice depend on, meaning there's less food for them to eat. They also damage young trees and breed very quickly. If you have a pet that you need to rehome, don't let it loose in the wild. Take it to a shelter or a pet store.
Thank you, Nadine, for sharing that. I'm going to go back to my slides. So we have a whole series of children asking their invasive species wonder questions that are really creative and amazing videos like that. And that one is inspired this activity, which it's a great question. How can a fuzzy bunny be bad? And they're not bad. They're just in the wrong place. And so in this game, it's simple. Children love to play tag, and this is one called Roundup Tag, but we call it the Cute and Fuzzy Invader Takeover. So it starts out with everyone, if you have young children playing this, they could role play, pretend to be mice, running around, scurrying around, gathering seeds, finding places to hide behind vegetation or in holes. And then you let the students know, well, I had this really cute bunny that I got as a pet, but it got really big and I didn't have room for it anymore. And it started eating everything, even the electrical cords in my house, and I couldn't take care of it anymore. So I thought it would be really happy to live at the park. So I decided to let it go there and let's see what happened next. So then the person who's it is the Cute and Fuzzy Bunny, and they tag the mice, and everyone they tag becomes a bunny. And you keep playing until everybody is a bunny. And then the important thing is to have the discussion afterwards. So how long did it take for the rabbits to take over? And what does the game represent? Because the rabbits, of course, are not eating the mice, they're eating plants. But other animals eat plants as well. So mice and many other native wildlife. So rabbits eat up all the plants, they kill small trees, they dig many holes, which reduces the food and shelter for many native animals, not only mice, including voles and deer, and all the animals that depend on the native plants to survive, including birds and butterflies. And also rabbits start breeding when they're just a few months old. Their gestation period is less than a month, and they can have 5 bunnies in a litter, and they don't have a breeding season. They breed throughout the year, so their numbers can get large very quickly. So then you can talk about how to be a responsible pet owner. and this Don't Let It Loose campaign, which is all about not only animals, but also not letting any aquatic like aquarium plants and things like that into the wild, because it may lead to big problems that you do not expect. Okay. So another thing I wanted to mention is that our website has wonderful resources on how to identify what you're looking at. So some invasive species, alert species, and animals and plants. So this is a great way to see some of the things if you are interested in identifying them and learning a little bit more about some of the invasive species that are out there. And then in that video of Jenny with the bunnies, she was using an app, and this is a free app that is really easy to use called Report Invasives BC. And it's something that you can also do with children. It can also be a great field guide to look at some of the things around in your neighborhood. And we encourage you to report what you see. And there's other apps as well, like iNaturalist. A lot of people are using that. And there's a children's, an easy version to use called Seek, iNaturalist Seek, which you aim your phone, the app, at different species, and it actually identifies it for you. So these are great. No matter how you report it, it works. And this is a wonderful activity you can do with your students that help them to make see what's growing in your schoolyard or in your backyard. So we have many educational activities on our website already in this games and activities area, and for educators. The activities that we are piloting will be right here, but we have them for all of you today in a draft form that we'll be sending it out to you. So we'd love to have you pilot it. Let us know how it worked. Share photos with us, and yeah, share with us. Here we are. And then you'll have a chance to have that invasive species expert come to your classroom and some other resources to share with you for being our test pilots for some of these activities. And we are developing them in larger format as well that will be on our website. So thank you very much from all of us at the Invasive Species Council. This is our contact information that we'll be sharing with you, and you can reach us by email or on our website. And everyone's holding up their loppers to ask a question. I don't have my loppers with me.
Well, thank you so much, Sue and Stephanie, for this great presentation and your energy and enthusiasm for the topic. So now is the time to please post your questions into the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, not the chat box. Make sure you're clicking on the Q&A. And then I will start with the first and top voted questions for Stephanie and Sue, and we will make our way from there. So, and you can also check the list of questions to see if your question has already been asked, and then you can upvote that question and it'll move it to the top of the list. So go ahead and type your questions in the Q&A box now, and I will relay them to our presenters. Okay, we have one question so far. So Jessica is asking, they discourage transporting firewood to different areas of BC. Why don't they monitor the transport of hay, or is that in the works?
That's such a good question, Jessica, and it's come up a lot with with anyone who buys hay and moves it around. It is something that has been discussed. It's a really challenging thing because, of course, it's hard to track things like hay, but there is a program that it's not in place yet, but they're working on a certified weed-free hay program, similar to when you buy like grass seed and flower seeds, and you need an outlined document that shows exactly what is in that seed mix. So I can look into that a little bit more and send you some information on it, but it's a great point.
Thank you, Sue. Any more questions, please feel free to just type them in the Q&A box. And if you're having any trouble, type them in the chat and we can move them over for you.
Great, we've answered everybody's questions.
Phew.
Yes, no more questions yet, but please feel free. Wait a few minutes.
Another thing, if people don't have questions, if you have other activities that you have used with students to learn about invasive species, we'd love to hear about how you like to inspire your students.
Yes, you can type those in the chat and then I'll read them out loud if anyone has any activities they like to do with their own students.
Of course, invasive species removal is something that students love to do, and those were some of the photos that I had in my slides of some great stewardship projects. It'd be amazing to connect every classroom with a special place near their schoolyard to work on invasive removal. That would be a nice vision, I think. I know teachers are looking for that.
Oh, wow, we got another question all the way from Argentina. So Anna is asking, thank you for the talk and hello from Argentina. We are currently working with kids on making infographics to showcase in public spaces. Do you have any advice?
Wow, infographics. I'm imagining, is that based around, you know, for a learning tool or a sign? I'm imagining it sounds like it could be a sign to put up in public spaces. I don't think I have a huge amount to give with that, although, you know, some of the experiences we've had with students making signage is that student signage with students' first names on it, they don't get taken down as much as a government sign or an official sign, which is a good thing because it's a very personalized thing.
Yeah.
Steph, do you have anything to oh, is there another note there, Allison?
Yeah, Anna just added, it's a sign to warn people.
Ah, okay, cool. I'm imagining put that student's, you know, first name on it, and I think it would be a really popular sign.
Yeah, and I was thinking, I saw many activities where it was connected to a larger campaign, like this Don't Let It Loose or Play Clean Go. And so if you have, like, I don't know what it's like in Argentina, but if there's any kind of messaging that's kind of standard or a slogan that either is already developed by different agencies in Argentina, or maybe the students would come up with their own slogan and their own artwork to share that message.
Yeah,
that might make it a stronger message.
That's a great idea. And it looks like we have a couple of ideas for activities. So Sonia is saying, assign a student and oh, sorry, my dog is squeaking. Sorry, I tried to ensure he would be quiet, but he doesn't want to agree. So assign a student an invasive species and then have them interviewed by a peer. A bit of time for research is required. They can then speak in first person from the perspective of the invasive species.
That's great. I believe we have that. We have that included in one of our activities as well. Yeah, it's so fun. We thought it could even be kind of like a news flash, you know, like could be videos and breaking news, and it could include maybe the invasive species, an interviewer, and maybe even the native species. But I love that idea. That's great. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's good to know that the students like to do that, since we were also thinking of doing something similar.
That's great. I love it too. Hearing straight from the pond, the American bullfrog tells all.
There's another good one. I have my grade 7s, or Michelle is saying, I have my grade 7s create a PSA about an invasive species. They used our website to identify a species of interest, and students are so surprised to learn which plants and animals are invasive.
Oh, that's fabulous. And maybe the PSAs are things that could be used in Argentina.
That's right.
Different invaders.
Different invaders, maybe not, maybe some of them are the same. That'd
Some
be
are the
interesting to know.
same. Mhm.
Yeah. We'd love to see those PSAs too, if that's possible. That'd be so fun to see. Thanks for that.
You got one more question from Myra. Are the teachers in general interested to learn about the subject?
Are the teachers interested?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm curious if Myra is a teacher as well. What would you say your experience is, Sue? I think I find people are very interested, but you have more experience with this than I do.
Well, I think you're right. I think I would share your perspective, Steph. I think because invasive species are a positive environmental issue that we can tackle and actually do something about, I think that is a good impetus for people actually going out and adopting a green space and mapping the species, and actually then taking some of the invasive species out that are that we're able to do with safely, and then doing some restoration. So it's a really positive hands-on thing, like Steph was saying, that often the big environmental issues we tackle, whether it's biodiversity loss or climate change, you feel fairly helpless as an individual and as an educator to support your students in doing something about it. But my experience has been there's a lot of positive interest in invasive species for those reasons.
Yeah, I agree. And the outdoor portion can be something of just getting people used to going outdoors. It can start in your schoolyard and just looking at what's there, starting small and baby steps if teachers aren't used to bringing their students outdoors. So the indoor lessons are something that's really connected to what's happening in your local places. There's many different ways that people are affected by invasive species. So finding out, well, how does it affect me? How does it affect the activities that I love, or my pet, or the foods that I eat? And so everybody can connect to invasive species in some way. And then maybe the outdoor portion might not be going somewhere very far. It could be just looking at what's in your schoolyard and connecting to local nature outdoors. So I think most teachers are very interested, and especially because of those curriculum links, it's what is being encouraged by the Ministry of Education.
Perfect. It looks like we don't have any more questions or comments. So if there's any final ones, please feel free to put them in now. Otherwise, I've just got a couple closing announcements. Just wait a second. Doesn't look like it. It is 4:30. All right, so on behalf of the Invasive Species Council of BC and to everyone that's here and listening, thank you so much again, Sue and Stephanie, for sharing your expertise with us today. We will be emailing all of the attendees a link to a short survey afterwards. So please take a moment to complete it and provide your feedback and ideas for future webinars. So a few more announcements. May is a busy month for us. It's Invasive Species Action Month. So check out what's happening in your community on our website. And Nadine will be putting some links in the chat for you to check out there. And please note our fun What's in My Backyard competition ends at the end of May. So the goal is to post as many photos as you can of invasive species you find in your backyard, which can be your schoolyard, local park, backyard, or even out in the backcountry. And the group who posts the most photos wins. There's some great prizes, and time is running out, so be sure to get all your entries in by May 31st. And also, we invite all invasive species researchers, practitioners, and students to submit your abstract for our 2021 Invasive Species Research Conference, which will be taking place virtually from October 6th to 7th, and see the link in the chat window for more information on our conference. And if you enjoyed this webinar, please consider supporting ISCBC's work by joining us as a member. So members are offered discounts on our paid events and training courses, and among other benefits. So you can visit our website to learn more on that too. And one final note, if you live in BC and you'd like to make an impact in your community and you're between the ages of 15 and 30, you can consider volunteering with us. and see the link in the chat for volunteering too. And that is it. And thank you everyone so much for attending, and we will see you at the next webinar.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
folks. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.